now I'd like to recognize this very distinguished gentlelady from Michigan, Congresswoman Tlaib, for her 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chairman, for this incredibly important hearing. You know, I want to begin with submitting, for the record, if I may, article that specifically talked about how the Buffalo shooting suspect says his motive was to prevent eliminating white race.
Without objection.
Mr. Ward, can you tell me a little bit more about the Buffalo shooter? Because I don't want people in Buffalo, especially the community that was targeted, to feel like we don't understand and see that they were targeted because of who they were.
Yes, Representative Tlaib, we should be clear that those targeted at the supermarket were targeted because they were Black. It was a Black shoppers. Not all the victims were Black, but the majority were. And we should understand that the killer himself identified himself as an ethno-nationalist, as a eco-fascist, and a national socialist, which is a reference to the Nazi Party in Germany. When asked if folks could call him that, he said, in his own words, "I would not disagree with you." I think it's important not to mislead in terms of the driving force of these killers, which was anti-Semitism. They were attacking a Black population because they saw African Americans as puppets of a Jewish cabal, of a Jewish conspiracy. And that's why the killer acted in violence.
Much, Mr. Ward. Ms. McCord, in 2006 intelligence assessment, the FBI warned that, quote, white supremacist infiltration of law enforcement can result in other abuses of authority and, you know, passive tolerance of racism within communities served. And the issue is getting worse. I mean, in the last few years, we have seen countless videos of law enforcement officers wearing badges associated with extremist groups like the 3%ers and private law enforcement Facebook groups filled with racism, hate, and I even saw law enforcement, you know, in Detroit specifically target Black Lives Matter protesters and so forth. A member of the U.S. Capitol was even caught reading a printed out copy of the disgusting anti-Semitic text, the Protocols of Elders of Zion, at the entrance of our Capitol building, when, you know, literally short months after January 6th. More recently, and this is even more disturbing, an internal FBI email revealed that there is, quote, a sizable percentage of the FBI employee population that felt sympathetic to the group that stormed the Capitol. So, Ms. McCord, I want to talk about this because, you know, we see a growing link, and I know it's intentional by the white supremacists and nationalists, between law enforcement personnel and white supremacy. Can you talk about how that is threatening the constitutional multiracial democracy that we live in?
Yes, thank you for the question. And, you know, we know that extremists do actually recruit from law enforcement, particularly paramilitary organizations like Oath Keepers, like 3%ers. They recruit because of their training in paramilitary tactics, their use of weaponry, their knowledge about incendiary devices. And unfortunately, you know, it's not the predominance among law enforcement, but the number of those who espouse extremist views, including white supremacy, within law enforcement has an outsized impact, of course. And, you know, the threat to democracy comes if these are the people who are in charge of, you know, complying with the rule of law, actually protecting public safety in their communities, and they have no, their communities can't trust them to actually protect them, represent their values, or not represent, but protect their values and allow them to have the equal opportunity to participate in democratic processes, it really does break down. And that is why courts have recognized, including the Supreme Court, that even though First Amendment rights do apply to police, it can't be such that they can undermine the mission of their agencies by espousing the type of extremist rhetoric which makes them unable to actually protect public safety in their communities.
Thank you, Ms. McCord. Mr. Ward, you know, one of the things I learned from a Black Baptist pastor in Detroit, you know, as you know, I grew up in the most beautiful Blackest city in the country, in the city of Detroit, is he said, you know, we're not a country that's divided, we're disconnected. And I know exactly what he means, because when I called Rabbi Miller in Michigan when his synagogue was targeted recently by hateful rhetoric, it was some of his employees that were Black that were first targeted. And he seemed so incredibly worried about even that more than obviously at the moment of the fact that they were targeted because of their Jewish faith. And it was at that moment I remembered that saying, can you talk about this impact of how we need to understand that the person that went into Buffalo, the person that targeted the synagogue in Michigan, that we're all connected in this form of hate. And there is no hierarchy of who gets hated the most. It's they want us all gone.
The gentlelady's time has expired, but please, Mr. Ward, if you'd answer, that'd be great.
I will answer briefly. We should understand that this is a movement that doesn't drive hate, whether it's anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish, anti-Black. It is tapping into bias in order to build a political platform to overthrow the United States of America. That's the goal of white nationalism. And what we have connected is that we are all victims of white nationalism, whether we come from minority communities, law enforcement, government workers. We are the victims in this country, and we have to respond and defend our community and defend our Constitution. And we do that by denouncing bigotry and political violence.
Thank you very much. 2 articles have been submitted for the record. One, the Buffalo supermarket shooting suspect posted an apparent manifesto repeatedly citing great replacement theory, and alleged Paul Pelosi attacker posted multiple conspiracy theories. With that, I will recognize Mr. Donalds